For those who have not had the previous pleasure of meeting me, my name is Derek Richmond. I'm in Manager Engineering for the City of Courtenay. And my role here is to be timekeeper, try to keep things moving along. My commitment to you today is to have you out here for 4 podcasts for previous sessions, so let's try and make that happen. Okay, so I want to set the scene today, talking about getting to know no boundaries and really looking at the context of the regional team approach. So, rather than simply giving you an end product, Kim and I want to walk you through the process of where we want to end up today in terms of how everything comes together.
I don't think so.
And to be successful in this, you need to build on these ideas together. There's no point in having provided talking heads here. We really want you to be part of this and understand where we've been, how we've got to the point where we are now, and where we're going. So I'm going to use a segue for this very brief talk of boundaries out of the theme. Nature knows no boundaries. And just picking up, this is a little bit like this is a little bit like the Rick Mercer report. Zooming in on Vancouver Island, the only difference is that we're not going to have a ramp session anymore. So funny. So we're going to be looking here at the rivers, and under the theme of nature knows no boundaries, rivers define their own boundaries with the shapes of those rivers. And man imposes his own boundaries. So, going along with this theme of boundaries, if you look here, here we have an issue of inconsistencies or incongruities, if you like, with boundaries between natural boundaries and the imposed boundaries, and that can set us up for a series of problems and potential failures. And then we have another broader example. It's not a very clear picture, but nevertheless it emphasizes the fact that within the Comox Valley, we've got a number of different regional districts, and political boundaries that we have to work with and that we work around. Now, we're going to follow along and stick with you here on this theme of boundaries. So, these boundaries, currently we have 4 major initiatives within the Comox Valley area. There's the regional growth strategy, sustainability strategy, the regional water study, and the regional sewerage study. And each has different drivers, different boundaries. And here you can see, for example, some examples of boundaries, terms of reference, for example, there are the areas of commonalities, or areas where you have similar objectives and goals. It's relatively small. Within those boundaries, there are different drivers like timelines, goals, and objectives. And that really still isn't shifting because you've still got these boundaries. We tend to work in a little silos, areas of specialization. And our challenge is to work around these boundaries and work with these boundaries. So ideally what we'd like to do is we'd like to shift this paradigm over to the one on the right, where the area of commonalities becomes greater. So striving for the commonalities aspect. And looking at the water-centric perspective, we are evolving. And you notice the reference back to evolving. The first session, the theme for the first session is evolution. So from an evolving perspective, we have been evolving, we are evolving in terms of the way we deal with best management practices, alternative design standards, how we use those issues to interact and talk more outside our normal silo. The old way of doing business was to while around, max the development out of it, and whatever we had left, we try and sustain it. The design approach is to let sustainability, amenity, and social equity be the drivers. And again, don't lose this theme of boundaries. I keep coming back to it, because to be successful, we need to, we're going to follow the design approach. We need to think about focusing on our goals of protection and preservation. We need to think about integrated planning, designing with nature, planning on a woodship basis. We need to work outside our normal boundaries. And we need to proactively communicate and work with others. And this is not a new approach. by any means. Alberta has been successful, for example, by embracing these concepts through their principles that are within the Water for Life strategy. And they've also adopted the concept of integrated basin planning. And you might hear that terminology later on. So in summary, I'm saying it's going to be very brief. If we're going to have a team approach, we need to think globally, we need to act locally, we need to think ourselves as a team, not as an individual working aside. We need to break those boundaries down, we need to find a way to work around it. The 4 C's: communicate, collaborate, cooperate, and coordinate. Now before I hand off to Kim, I just want to mention, and I'm remiss in fact in 2 things, so I'll make this very, very brief. First of all, before I hand off to Kim, I just want to acknowledge that John King is here. John is the president of the CAVI. Apologies, John. Those people don't have chair. Sorry, chair. And provincial chair. Thank you, sir. So before I hand off to Kim, I just want to mention that for those of you who don't know Kim, or do, Kim has an aspired, what I'm looking for. Okay, as an aspiring and also an accomplished presenter and practitioner, has always had a secret passion. He's always wanted to be associated with, affiliated with somebody at a fairly high level to project his coming. So I'm going to ask the question, the obvious question. From Kim. Can we do it? I'll leave him with this one.
That's what you meant when you said you had a surprise. Okay. Let me just get this. Yeah. Let me ask a couple of questions first of you. First of all, how many people from this audience have actually attended all 3 of the seminars? Tom, you've been faithful, haven't you? Right? 2 out of 3. And who's here for the first time today? Okay, good. So part of what I'm doing then is to remind and refresh, and in some cases give you the Coles notes in about 5 minutes. And our whole theme for the series is, as you see here, is beyond the guidebook. And the key phrase is being create livable communities and protect stream health. You know, we can create livable communities in the process we can protect stream health. So that's a bit of a mantra. And I've used this slide in the 2 previous presentations, and I want to use it again to make the point, because I created this slide 2 years ago before meeting with the board of the regional district of Okanagan and Snoqualmie, in terms of talking about water sustainability and the growth strategy for that region and the fact that it had a water component. And I knew that in terms of talking to them or meeting with them, that if I didn't have their attention on the first slide, I wouldn't have their attention on the second slide. And so what I translated here was water sustainability into language that they understood and it resonated. And it's really coming back to this whole issue of where and how land is developed. I guess you're going to pick up in the steam, aren't you, Jack? And so in this case, people think in terms of 2 sides of the equation, you know, the water in and the water off. And so in terms of how water is used, it does come back to sustainability of supply, that's what we're talking about. And also how water runs off the land and sustainability of aquatic habitat. And the reason the 2 are linked, of course, all comes back to what you do in terms of the site. And our last session, we talked about Courtenay's soil depth policy, the fact that your soil layer is your sponge. You know, if you have a nice sponge, you use less on the supply side. As John will be trying to convert people in the Niagara region in the next little while, now that you've got the referendum pass, right? And then, of course, if you have that sponge, it doesn't run off. So that's kind of where we start. So I'll just try to reinforce a few concepts. Design with nature, Derek mentioned it. And so when we talk about design with nature and we talk about rainwater management, well, rainwater management is at the heart of green infrastructure. I mean, there's more to green infrastructure than rainwater management, but it's at the heart of it. And again, the mantra, to create livable communities and protect stream health. I'm going to keep hammering that theme. And so when we talk about beyond the guidebook, and part of this series, we have introduced everybody to a bunch of resources. Expect you to do your homework. I know Tom has been very good about doing his homework because he's always afraid I'm going to ask him a question. But I'm just going to just wave a few of the things. A number of you on the very first session got your copy of the guidebook from 2002. Beyond the guidebook, very thin document. I mean, these are all downloadable in our paperless society, at least parts of it. So, again, this is kind of the key language. Again, create livable communities and protect extreme health. You like that, right, Nike? Right? And so, convening for action, in terms of kind of reminding us why we're here and why some of you have made this commitment to 3 out of 3, and some of you, if you had known about the first one, you would have been here 3 out of 3, but at least you're here 2 out of 3, right? I can tell by your smile. And so, convening for action, and I guess when we came up with this phrase a couple of years ago, a lot of us have been around for 30 plus years, and we've talked a lot in our careers, and time is running out, and we want to make things happen, right? And so we started talking about how we create a picture of the future that we want, and it really comes down to these 3 words. You got to have a vision, and you got to think about the vision today for this valley. And so what the vision means, what will it look like? That's the what question. Well, the goal. Throughout this whole series, we've talked about the new business as usual, doing business differently, different ways of saying it, but it's the time for change. So that's the so what. And one of the things that, again, looking back at 30 plus years of experience, is we're always been very good at planning, but we have this difficulty going from talk or planning to action. And that's the difference. I mean, at the end of the day, we want you to come out here so inspired that you actually do something. Not just sort of say, that was a great day I had. And that leads into the third part, which is the strategy. The now what are we going to do? What are we going to do better or differently to get from here to there? That's the there, right? What do you want this place to look like? You can substitute Vancouver Island, you can substitute British Columbia. You know, it's part of this whole Convening for Action initiative. So that's your basic mind map, Convening for Action. What, so what, now what? Today is the now what card. So just a recap of the 3 seminars. September 9th was the what. And so you heard Katrina Weidman from the Ministry of Community Services, Community Development now rather, talking about today's expectations for tomorrow's standards. That they'll be ramping up, and be raising the bar, and after lunch, Laura Kate's going to pick up on that theme in terms of green choices and the most recent ministry document. And so in terms of the 3 things you learned that day, we have moved from single-purpose stormwater management to multi-objective rainwater management. And I want to really hammer home that theme. You know that when you talk to me, I've just used the word stormwater for the last time. It's rainwater management because in terms of when you're talking to the non-engineering crowd, the non-technical crowd, they don't get it unless you use language like rainwater management because the body language changes, the minds open up. But that was one key lesson. The other one was the to get to the big picture, it starts with the smallest pieces. And so in the first seminar, we went out in the field and we went out to the East Courtenay area and did a walkabout. So that those have been here for the whole three seminars. You know, we started with a picture and we built on that picture in terms of now looking at how you get to the goal. And I've already flashed the guidebook in terms of a science-based and outcome-oriented. That's a key word, right? Convening for Action. We are outcome-oriented, not output-oriented. Fundamental difference. We're not trying to crank out numbers. We're trying to change the way our communities look and feel. Last month, and by the way, this has been a pretty significant commitment to you, right? September, October, November. And hopefully you've all had a chance to reflect on the material and maybe even done some homework. Because remember, there was a homework exercise for today. I know Tom's done it. Catch you, Tom. But we made it easy for you. So, last time Susan Rutherford was here, our focus was on this document, the Green Infrastructure Guide, and we got into the legal issues. And I think that was very successful from our perspective in terms of rather than having Susan just talking about the law, building around a set of questions and issues, and really truly getting a town hall segment going. That was really quite, from my perspective especially, really quite gratifying to see that we actually got a town hall segment going last time, didn't we, Nick? And if you remember, one of Susan's messages was, accept the risks when choosing a new path and look for the benefits that will result. So it's like saying, is the glass half full or half empty? Well, in my case, it's half full and the water level is rising. That's got to be your attitude. And lastly, which was our key message, especially with sitting in an IMO crowd and having Dean there, which is, if it's a dirty site, there will be no building inspection. Because at the end of the day, it's down to those smallest actions. That's where you win or lose it. Today, the now what? I hope you take good notes now. I want to talk about 3 lenses to bring our future into focus. Now, you did get a reminder. I'll remind you again that in the last email, which Derek sent out yesterday, there was this document, 6-pager by Vic German and Saanich Councillor called The Natural City. And if you haven't already downloaded and read it, I urge you to do that, because that's really the first bullet, which is he talks about how you're bringing the future into focus through a regional growth strategy, understanding climate change and quality of life in place, because it's one thing that characterizes the British Columbia in general, and this region in particular is it's all about the quality of life. So, another one of the resources to make sure you read, because most of us are basically water guys, right, Ron? So water is the unifying element, but joking aside, I mean, it is the unifying element in that when you talk about climate change, inevitably you talk about water, aren't you? Whether it's floods or droughts. And so climate change adaptation is all about water, and significantly, I guess with your ministry, on the water stewardship side, I mean, that's become the mantra, which is climate change mitigation, that's greenhouse gas, carbon, climate change adaptation is all about the water. So that's the other key message coming out of today. And then, of course, what this day is all about is the regional team approach will ensure consistency in doing business differently. And Maggie, I mean, we did that the Cowichan Valley Water Balancing Forum less than a month ago, right? And that was part of it. Everybody, the local government, the development community, their consultants, having the same storyline, the same understanding, so you get some consistency in how you do business. So that's the learning outcomes for today. Now, if you remember, for those of you who were last time, I guess that was mostly him because he mostly hands up for one of the 3 or 2 lectures. You remember Susan Rutherford made a point of saying the commentary on effective municipal rainwater stormwater management, and this is the other document which was in the email yesterday, saying take the time to download it. Remember, Susan talked briefly about the first 2 pages. What I want to emphasize for you today is not only are there the 2 pages, the first 2 pages, there's also the second part, which is establishing watershed-specific runoff capture performance targets. That really relates back to the use of the water balance model as a tool to achieve the outcome. And that was why I referred to with Andy Razik here from the town of Cowichan Lake about the water balance model forum, which we had a month ago. Again, everything we talked about here is a bottom-up approach. So 2 important documents. Check that email if you haven't already downloaded them, and download them and read them. And here's the quote from Susan, which is, the commentary identifies specific actions and commitments for greening the built environment and protecting watershed health by means of affordable and effective performance targets. Now, originally when we had the concept of this series, we were envisioning a smaller group. We were actually thinking in terms of a group of 12 to 15 people, which we have more time for teaching. And so a lot of what we began to see, because of the incredible response, the participation, is that we're having to really talk more of a high level and gloss over it. Really rely on you to become motivated on your own time to actually then dig in and read the material and begin to do that self-study. And Living Water Smart, emphasizing this document, which those of you who were here at the first session got a copy of Living Water Smart. Here's the key quote, page 43, as Lynn Fry-Wilker, the Ministry of Environment, said to me, this is the linchpin of Living Water Smart. By 2012, all land and water managers will know what makes a stream healthy and therefore be able to help land and water users factor in new approaches to securing stream health and the full range of its stream benefits. Again, what's the desired outcome? Create a community, protect stream health.
20-second comment or something like that.
Finally, reinforcing this point about the new business as usual and why the new business as usual, creating communities and protecting stream health. So it's all about designing with nature. I can tell you know what I mean. You probably remember Ian McCart. Anyway, so it's a design with nature approach, and the reuse of resources are key to climate change adaptation. And Derek?
Thanks, James. I just want to acknowledge we've got some guests at the back here. Sandy Gray is the CAO for the CA Pro, for those who don't know him, those of you who don't know. and he's brought with him some other representatives. I'll sadly introduce them. We want to speak very briefly to take on today's session.
Thanks, sir. Well, welcome to Courtenay and Comox Valley. It's an opportunity. I know you're talking about regional cooperation and things like that. It's my pleasure to have an entourage of a combination of elected mayors as well as chief administrative officers from the Comox Valley. The tall gentleman to our left is Mayor Fred Bates, past mayor, current mayor, I guess it is, of Cumberland, as well as re-elected. Fred is also the chairman of the regional district. Next to him, the gentleman with the nice red Canadian flag, because we're downstairs on the torch celebrations, is Greg Phelps. Greg's currently a councillor in Courtenay and just elected as mayor and will be sworn in on December 1st. Next to him is Richard Hannigan, the chief administrative officer of Comox. And next to Richard is Paul Ives. Paul is a councillor member from Comox and just newly elected and will be sworn in as mayor of Comox. And lastly, token female. There's another one, but she's not here. This is Deborah Oakman, and Deborah's the CAO for the regional district. And the other person that's supposed to be with us, but is probably having a hard time getting parking spot, is both from Cumberland. And it was fortuitous in one sense that we're all together. We're talking cooperation and how we're going to move forward in the Comox Valley with the elected council. And so 4 of us were here, or 4 jurisdictions were here for the torch relay announcement, but we're just going to go and have lunch together now. I think it's great that all of you are here. We're certainly thrilled by the work of CAVI. I think it's a tremendous initiative that's going on. The cooperation that's going on around development and things is very critical to all of us in Vancouver Island. It's certainly critical to us in the Comox Valley. We've had numerous initiatives that have taken place, more particularly in the last couple of years. A regional initiative on sustainable development strategy. And, we're currently out with the various communities consulting with them. We've got a workshop tomorrow, for example, where we've got 8 working groups of citizens who are going to be talking and working on strategies on a variety of things from housing to various infrastructure, etc. Also, we're just at the throes of, under the regional district, of starting the regional growth strategy, so that'll be hot on the heels. We've worked on transportation, housing, so we're working very hard on a number of initiatives for the betterment of the Comox Valley. So, on behalf of the group I'm here with, we're all welcoming you here. I hope you have a good time. I'm sure any of the elected officials will happily talk to you for a half an hour. Anyways, thanks for inviting us.
Thank you all very much for coming today. The timing couldn't have been better.